Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are. Welcome to the Third Culture Convos podcast. I'm joined with my boy Waseem. I am Majid. What's up? What's up, man? How you doing?
I'm great. I'm in good spirits.
I woke up in good spirits, but then, as usual, the media and the news brought me back down to earth very quickly.
Oh,
This morning I woke up and the first notification on my phone was Gary Neville has written an article, ex-Man United player, a team I used to support a lot.
used to, huh? Oh.
That's a different topic. That's about just sports viewing in general. But Gary Neville says Premier League should stop Saudi Arabia transfers. So Waseem, what's going on? Why would Gary Neville pick Saudi Arabia? You're our resident Saudi. What's going on? Why is he banning? Why not France? Why not Spain? Why Saudi Arabia?
Why is he saying this? Why is he saying this? I think, look, just to put, I not, I don't want to put my cards on the table, but I'll put my cards on the table anyway. Now, I think my initial reaction when Gary Neville said that, when I read that Gary Neville was talking, when I read that Gary Neville was talking, I was like, shut the fuck up. That's my first reaction when it came to Gary Neville. And the reason when they say, because I feel like any conversation about regulation, about money in the game, only serves to benefit the established money in the game. So the money that was already in the game tries to protect the new money from coming into the game because they got the monopoly of the game. And so they don't want other players coming in and taking a piece of their pie. It comes from a mindset of scarcity.
So let me just take a step back for all the third culture kids who are tuning in. Why this is important is that a British football player is asking for the market, the free market, to stop selling to Saudi Arabia because they're saying that basically Saudi clubs are buying bad British contracts very easily and bringing them into the Saudi league with the objective of promoting the league and football in Saudi Arabia. But old school football traditionalists feel that this is just financial doping. You've always got this weird safety net where you can you can offer as a British club bad contracts for a long time, knowing that you can just offload them to your mother company, which is owned by Saudi Arabia at some point. It's not directly Saudi Arabia, the country, but there are shell companies and not shell companies, but holding companies and stuff. Anyways, so from a third culture perspective, there's a lot of different cultures and different styles of communication and everything. There's a lot of worlds that are colliding. I just wanted to take a step back, and we can go back into.
I think we're in an excellent position to see it. Having one of the things, I think the words that come to my mind whenever we're talking about this type of stuff, and that creates this type of reaction from me, is arrogance. So it is arrogance in a position. And I feel like when you're a traditionalist and you have sort of benefited from the tradition, either being in Europe or in football and whatever, then it's difficult to separate where your reservations come, because I can understand the reservations of which are common throughout the game since the FA was established in 18 something, is that the game has changed. It continues to change. And not back in my day when we used to play without gloves. Remember, the goalkeepers didn't used to have gloves. Then they gave them gloves and they're like, what a farce. And then they told them, you know what? Maybe you should stop smoking. Maybe you should stop drinking before the game. And everyone's like, man, I don't want to live in this world anymore.
Open stud tackles, those are no longer. Those used to be very commonplace. Send a message.
And people's attitudes about that also follow a very common trend where, back in my day it was better, and now they're trying to change it. And usually you're trying to find, I think, like, leaders try to find a balance so that they can keep the core beauty of the game and what attracts people to the game and what makes people want to watch the game and pay money towards the game, and also and maintaining the integrity of the game while also addressing challenges within the game. And that conversation usually leads to bringing technology in, how much technology you should bring in, how quickly you should phase it in. VAR, virtual assistant referees, was a big part of this, and that took forever to bring apart. Like, they literally had to change the entire leadership through scandal in order to put a new leadership that would accept that, because the old guard was the old guard.
And the implementation of it is still very questionable among football fans with VAR. Like, they
Yes.
feel like it's been implemented in such a way that it should fail and get
And
everyone
so that
can
it can
just
be
get rid
removed.
of it.
Yeah. There are controversies involved. And so I feel like there's that. But then also, when you're talking about either Saudi money or Qatari money or Emirati money or anyone else's money, anyone, Russian money, they did the same. Thai money, they did the same. Chinese money, they do the same. It's not just Gulf money, but it's outside money. And why do I say that's rich? No pun intended. Is because the viewership of those, like, a big part of the money making scheme of that game, of the sport, even though they're the owners of the game, or at least the owners of the tradition and the history of the game, comes from viewership in Saudi Arabia, in Qatar, in the Emirates, in China. In the summer when they tour, they package up all the teams, Real Madrid and Nations Leagues, all these like extra games. So when it comes to player welfare, when it comes to making sure they play all the time, making sure that they're playing in 1 week in California, the next week in Bali, right? And they just got them moving around the world doing all these games, or in Jakarta, and they do all this stuff. Then it's it's okay to make the money and to exploit those audiences.
It is funny that Gary Neville is saying this because Manchester United is currently his former club that he loves is for sale, and one of the bidders is British, a local British fan, and one of the bidders is Qatari. And he hasn't really said anything against Qatari. It's more the transfers to Saudi. Like, on a very technical basis, he's Karim Benzema and Koulibaly and all of these people are now suddenly overnight. And we saw this, by the way, with the Chinese Super League a couple years ago, if you remember. For 1-2 years, everybody suddenly was moving to China. They're saying that this is different. The Saudi League is saying that we are not that. We're much more sustainable. We've been around from the 1970s. We have a viewer base. We're a growing league, and we just want to take advantage. Whereas English
and you're not so
football
upset
fans,
when the US does it. Like, I don't hear the same, because they say, wait, maybe the US doesn't have as much money, but they also don't have as much viewership. It's the Saudi League is big. It's not a little league.
because it's not just the viewership numbers, it's the viewership value as well. If you only have 1,000 fans, but those 1,000 fans are ready to pay $10,000 per ticket, versus like cricket, for example, where you have 1 billion fans, but they're not ready to spend more than $15.
Yeah.
So like, it's not just the sheer number. It is also, there's a quality in terms of just they spend on this sport, the jerseys, the latest shoes, all of that stuff.
Yeah, and they know like, they are fans. They are fans of the sport, both local. So they got a local team that they support. I do too. In Saudi Arabia, I have my local team.
Who's your team?
I couldn't be happier, man. I'm Ittihadi. And so we not only did we win the league, we also signed Benzema, who's one of my favorite players. And then we signed Kante. So now we got also a midfielder. I couldn't be happier.
When Waseem is not supporting Ittihad, he is supporting Karim Benzema's former team, Real Madrid.
Yeah, Real Madrid. So this really worked out for me. And so that's why I said, Gary Neville, sit down.
From the left pocket to the right pocket.
Yeah, some of us are
Whatever.
quite happy about this, man. And maybe you, and this is what I say to Gary Neville, maybe you, if you were back in your playing days and you were at the twilight of your career, you would have taken one of these. I think probably what people are most upset about is not the audacity, but I like the audacity of Saudi in this sense, where they're offering the money. Like they're coming and they're like, hey, do you want to come? 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 And then the player, and I'm surprised because usually when they do a project like this, they're getting players that are at the ends of their careers. So Messi signs for Inter Miami. That's for end of his career. The Inter Miami ticket prices the day after go up in price and sell out immediately. This is star power. This is important for a league to be able to attract these types of players, especially in the world game where there are competing leagues, and especially where there is already like a handicap in terms of Europe being the first movers. Let's say they've been in the game for longer. They do charge the highest prices. They do have the best products,
Most polished product.
it's great. It's very nice. And so when I see other places with the support, like competing with them, I'm a free market guy, right? Competition is good. And and usually when they want to regulate it out, oh no, they shouldn't be allowed. But like, why shouldn't they be allowed? Like, why not? Because they have too much money. Like you're totally okay with the money. Like,
It's a very British thing, I've noticed, to be very snotty about money, but also shameless about money at the same
at the same
time. I
time,
don't know how to.
yeah.
It's almost because they're so shameful of it, they're so shameless about it.
Yeah, you hold two positions at the same time and you're looking, you go, okay. And the thing is, then they have to go back and revisit the Newcastle deal. So Saudi Arabia has a stake in, or not in Saudi Arabia. I think also the way this terminology is used, it's not Saudi Arabia, it's the Saudi Public Investment
It's
Fund.
the investment fund of exactly.
And sure, if it's government run, yeah, but it's so easy, I think, to take this sort of Orientalist view and be like, that's entirely run by the state, and therefore it's a state, and we don't want our clubs run by the state. And you say that unless the club wins, and then if the club wins, you're like, oh, I'm happy that the club. And even this logic, these things don't make sense, because when Chelsea was owned by a Russian and Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine, Russian ownership had to end immediately as part, like, and that also,
that's what I mean about, that's why I made my British statement earlier. I'm glad you brought this up. That's what I mean. There's a pattern, there's a historical, and I have, as a Pakistani, I have many other examples, but we'll stick to football. When Rome, it's really weird. As an American, I am speaking right now, that if I have paid money for a certain good, and we've all acknowledged for 15 years that I own this good, everyone acknowledges this, which free market system am I forced to sell because I'm guilty by association? Roman, as whatever you think about Abramovich, the old owner of Chelsea, he didn't do anything himself illegal or wrong or anything. It's because he's friends with this, he's a Russian oligarch, so we're putting pressure on him to sell. And that, like, from a democratic viewpoint, and like using democracy where democracy and capitalism meet, it's very weird that Roman Abramovich was forced to sell Chelsea. That even back then, this made no sense. So you took the money, you were happy when he was signing checks, and now you're forcing him to sell his thing. It's weird how so isn't this now state-run machinery? With the fact that you force him to sell, isn't there a state hand involved in this? Or why are we not using the dark art language?
yes,
sprinkling it on.
Yeah, exactly. I think you said it very well. I think you said it very clearly. And that's the thing. That's why I get triggered when I hear these types of comments because of new money, right? And the story of new money versus old money is a story we've heard plenty of times, right? Like,
Within new money, there's also dumb money. Yani, there's a big hands-off policy about the fact that Chelsea went and bought a team that couldn't perform. Everyone predicted that all these players that you've bought in the last year under the new ownership, they're just a collection of players. They're not a team. They're not going to do well together. But they still, like, where is the blame? Where's the accountability for the decisions that were made that brought us to the position where we need to go out and get new money?
yeah.
What
Well,
happened to the old money?
and how much I know that in English clubs, right, when you do look at the old money, right, and you look at like Newcastle, right, they were begging for someone to come buy the club, right? They were so done. I think it was Mike Ashley, right? They were so done with this guy, right? And even the Glazers, right? The Glazers are not necessarily, I don't know how they fall as old money or new money. I don't know where they're categorized.
Because you know the Family Guy meme, the Peter Griffin border control meme,
Yeah.
because they pass a certain skin tone, it's considered old money. They bought into a classy organization with old money, they, even though the way they did it is like clearly they've abused the club. They've used it as all the money they've taken out of it, they put into their pockets.
Yeah, yeah.
Literally
They've
speaking,
enriched
like
themselves and then allowed the club to just fail. Like
there's no
allowed
cultural, like if there's any, it's that they're individual bad owners. There's no cultural issues. It's not that American owners, whereas when it's Saudi ownership or colored ownership, usually Arab ownership, if there's one mistake, it's like a whole, they're all like this.
It's a whole thing. And then when I think another part of this, and this may be controversial, is when, and because this is where every article that I read about either the Saudis always has a line on like human rights abuses and human rights issues and talking about it as if it's a moral question. And I think that's rich, right? Again, I think that's rich because where does your, like, where you choose to bring up the moral question without without actually having any either firsthand knowledge or any knowledge of what's going on, what the situation is, but using that as the, of course, because that means you are in support, and it takes away the nuance of things. But when you talk, right, like how many countries are currently like at war or have military bases or are doing things that are like, you want to talk about morals, we can talk about morals all we want, but we don't use the same measuring stick on absolutely everybody. Like we're not fair when it comes to that, and it seems quite unfair the way that stick is used to describe. We're like, okay, no, we won't take that money because that's dirty money, and then usually that is tested, and money talks, man. I'm sorry, like every time it's been tested, money wins, and this is not like I'm not saying this as I'm happy about it or that I'm sad about it or that I'm not trying to put an emotional element to it, but it's I feel like realistic every time I've seen it. And then when you ask someone to regulate that, then it becomes sort of morality, and morality doesn't, like, it depends on who's in office and what morality you want to use, because you're clearly not going to apply it to yourself. One of the things I've been listening to now is because we're running into U.S. election season again, and we got presidencies running, and the primaries are getting started, and I'm listening to. I'm interested in this stuff, so I listen to the Democratic leadership. I listen to the Republican leaderships, and I listen to what each candidate says about certain things, and honestly, like one example is military spending. There's no difference. Like they're both on the same side on this debate, right? Like they just say words differently, but they're all about increasing or maintaining military spending. Like none of them is about decreasing it, and none of them is about holding. Even though we know that like military spending, you know how many reports come out where they're like, we don't know where all the money goes that you give us. Like every time we do an audit, like billions, I don't know, right? Or like secret. I don't know if they call them even secret projects. They say not secret projects. We can't tell you where we're spending this. No, they're like we don't know. We can't account for them. And so then, but no one's talking about that. Everybody talks about giving them more money in order to fuel more wars and to, let's say, weaken Russia, for example, but at the cost of Ukrainians, right? Call me crazy.
There's a movie, it was released in 1998. It's called The Pentagon Wars, and it stars Kelsey Grammer, the star of Frasier, Sideshow, the voice of Sideshow Bob, and Carrie Elwes, a really funny actor. And this is just what it's about. And it's based on a true story. And at the beginning of the movie, it says, believe it or not, all of this happened. Major General Partridge is in charge of the Bradley Fighting Vehicle Project, which has been in development for 17 years at a cost of $14 billion. That's the first line of the movie. So, and no one knows it's over 17 years, 14 billion. They still had no result. By the end of it, they were just like, halas, what you said, put it under like confidential, like yo, like whatever. We were
Spending.
R&D, confidential R&D, and brush it aside, and that money's gone. Like, what about why couldn't that money be used somewhere else? Isn't that, could you not frame that in a human rights argument case that yo, but this in general, the West is much more merciful towards financial crime than it is physical or violent crime. If you can get away with it on a contract, you're okay. The morality issue doesn't matter because you made a business out of it, and Uncle Sam will get his cut from tax and will be able to market you that you're getting employment. For example, your payday loans. These companies are basically legal loan sharks.
Yeah, yeah.
Like the only
Oh,
difference
totally.
between loan sharks and them is that they have an LLC and loan sharks is just sitting in the barbershop.
They are providing an important service.
At 300% interest rate over 2 weeks, kind of thing.
No one else is offering.
And they're taking full advantage of the consumer's gullibility or not reading the statements. If you
Or lack of options. Or lack of options.
That's the thing. A lot of it, they know this. The system is manipulated to bring it that way. And so this is where the definition of crime and human rights crime, and I'll show you, my brother Malcolm X in 1960s was starting a case. He wanted to present a case in the United Nations against the United States for crimes against Black people. So like, where is, like, what you want to talk? What about Native Americans? You guys, half of you guys don't really accept that a genocide even took place. That's considered a controversial critical race theory kind of thing, woke theory. Like, I don't know, I'm ranting right now, but it's just generally, I think the framing, because a lot of these articles and opinions and views come out from your establishment media houses, they have a very one world view look at things, and their cultural context, the context from which they draw cultural things, is just one way. They refuse to look at any other thing. Ask the same people about the war in Afghanistan or the war in Iraq and the civilian casualties. If we want to be real,
oh yeah,
real.
You want to talk about it,
like,
and it's easy, and we've talked about this a lot. I think I feel like we thought about this a lot, and I almost put this to bed, where it's right, like when you're fighting for freedom, everybody's a bad guy, right? Like when you're the freedom fighter and they're the terrorist, it's like you've already set up the situation so that there is a lack of nuance, right? Like I mean, man, literally today I was listening to Mike Pence talk about his like America as the leader with a soft heart but the hand on the holster, right? Like ready to shoot. And I thought about that, like that. How can you put your hand out in peace? Really, put your hand out to shake my hand in peace while your other hand is on the trigger. And I think about that image of you doing that, and I go, even if I shake your hand, because I don't have a pistol, right? I don't have a trigger, but I shake your hand, then is this freedom? Is this what freedom is? When you're in charge, that's the only way it works. But if someone else tries to get into the game, to get into the play, oh no. Don't put your head up too high or we'll take it off. And that doesn't sound very freedom to me. That sounds very tyrannical to me.
Are we the baddies? The meme.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, and this manifests itself again. What can I tell you? This manifests itself in American foreign policy. For example, what you said, the same Mujahideen became the Taliban overnight. The same Narendra Modi, who is visiting Mike Pence and company in Washington right now, he was banned 10 years ago as someone who perpetrated like a bad state actor. He was banned from America. He was rejected for the visa. And today he is being given an honor to speak in Congress, which is a very rare thing for foreign leaders. So that same individual that you banned 10 years ago for crimes against Muslims at that time, Gujarat and stuff, is today getting the big state honor.
Yeah.
And
It's wild, man. That's wild. And of all people, like they banned that BBC documentary that paints him in a bad light, and India couldn't. Like, it feels like they keep going further and further down this like path that is very like, oh no freedom of press, no free.
but the reason it's tolerated, the almighty
Yeah,
economic income output GDP whatever dollar,
yeah.
at the end it's all tolerated. That's what exactly it is. That what you said about, you can argue morality all you want, money will win, and that you can see in yours. We started with the Saudi league, we've ended up in DC's
Yeah.
Senate House. But that's the point, is that if we start looking at your thing, if we investigate you, look at you right now. As of today, you have let in somebody who everybody knows is like the cause of killing people, and you're giving him state honors. So what, like, where do you come off telling us that we're dirty money? What about this money? What
Well,
about
and
all the business deals that you're about to do with India? Is that not dirty money? Where you talk about Jamal Khashoggi, what about the journalist, the
just a few
BBC
months ago,
journalist?
remember those guys? All of this inflated money that wasn't real. That like it was just scheme on top of scheme on top of scheme on top of like leverage on top of leverage on top of leverage, and then it's just a big bubble of money, and everybody's got money, but nobody's got any money. Like,
Adani
yeah,
group
yeah, yeah.
thing that you were, yeah, yes.
Yes. So to me, like bringing it back, bringing it home. What I think is interesting about the Saudi project when it comes to the soccer players is not necessarily that they're doing it. Like, I think it's interesting that that sort of the establishment is against it, like so much against it, even though they're getting paid, right? Like, one of the things was like one of the players at Atalanta, right? Like, he was worth 40 million, and like one of the European clubs was trying to get him for 40 million, and then, but because of this, his price has now, so Atalanta has now set his price at 70 million as opposed to 40 million because there's money coming in, and they're upset because all of this money flooding in. But and since it's not a European league, so it's different from Qatar using Paris Saint-Germain to buy players, or Manchester City buying players. So it's different. So that it's, I don't like, why would you regulate another league? And also for the players that do end up that are offered these offers, everybody knows that the most competitive leagues in the world are in Europe and Western Europe specifically, right? And so the most competitive leagues, if that player at 28, 25, 26, 27 would like to spend the prime of his years making money as opposed to playing in the most competitive league, then that's their prerogative, right? That's totally up to them, right?
If they're living in the West, it's their prerogative. But the moment you decide to do it anywhere else in the world, it's, oh my God, like,
It's
you
poaching,
don't
and
read the terms and conditions. If you
yeah,
do the same thing, like, that's the thing. If, sorry to cut you off, but like NBA players do this all the time. There's peak NBA players who are just coasting on bad teams because they just want to get paid, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's the point, is why can't these players just be free to take the money? What about free? Where's your free market capitalism now?
If the prices go up, who raised the play, like Atalanta? Who raised the price of the player from 40 to 7 million? It wasn't anyone but Atalanta. It like, and so even when the smaller clubs, especially we call the feeder clubs, right? So they're not going to go out and spend 100 million on a player, right? Because they don't have that money. So but the smaller clubs do have their business model when it comes to raising funds outside of selling tickets. And even though they can't sell them with such a like in the same sort of power as like a Real Madrid or a Barcelona or an Inter Milan, for example, but because they don't have that international base the same way that those other clubs do and can attract that kind of money. So the only way that they can do is to get them young, get them developed, and then increase their value and then sell them. And that's how the club will build up itself and hopefully be performing. And so it knows that it can't hold on to play. They know that they can't hold on to players at their peak, but they got to make the most out of that player into financially, because they're going to come get clipped off. And it's just so funny when a really relatively rich Manchester United, a relatively rich Manchester United, because they throw money around like it was popcorn, now get upset because the Atalanta has raised the prices of their players because there's more money coming in. And so there's more money going around. And so Atalanta will get richer. So Atalanta will be able to spend that 70 million on whatever it sees fit. And so I don't necessarily see it as a negative side of the game, because also it does come down to the players, and the player does choose, all right, do I want to go play in like a relatively more relaxed league, or do I want to go play in a sort of more competitive league and try to win the Champions League, right? And try to win the top honors and try to become the best of the best. And not all players are created equally, right? It's not even, they're just not all the same. Some, who knows what their background is. I'm not judging them for any of the choices that they're making, right? I would love to be in their position. I don't know what I would choose.
Emma Raducanu, I think, the British tennis player, female tennis player, she had a interview recently, and she said that there are days where I regret winning the US Open because it's just added more pressure to my life, the burden of expectation, as opposed to I'm a champion now, I can chill. It's more, man, now every day I have to, like, the tension of the mental health aspect. So yeah, if I can make money, if I can make double the money for half the workload, you guys are just hating at this point, right?
And there's more than just money. And this is what the thing that I want to try to explain is that, because once, all right, money's on top, money talks, and that's what everybody wants to say and talk about. But it's more than just money, right? Like some people do, like I have enough skill and have built enough of a name that like I can now go to this league where I'm going to be loved, revered. And there are fan bases in this city, right? Benzema's opening was huge when he was unveiled to the stadium. There was no game. Everybody drove up to the stadium. The place was popping, right? To welcome, and that's amazing. Like that must feel unbelievable to get to come, and then there's 50,000 people in a stadium like chanting your name, excited about you arriving, and right, and hanging on every word you say. And that's it's not just the money that'll make you do that, and you still will want to perform, and you're still, because like you're still human. And so I don't, even just reducing it on down to money at the same time and being like, okay, we got to regulate the money, but also reduce it all down to money so that we dehumanize these people. Then why they're only supposed to be a few established players, and then everybody else doesn't get any help? And like the same way we made a big hubbub about the Super League a few years ago, and they're still working on it. They got to repackage it, rebrand it, kind of get it working properly to address some of the concerns that we had brought up with that league, with the Super League. And I think they're working on it, but they are addressing, even the Super League was addressing a similar problem that it seems like that's with Saudi coming in and their league being pulled. You can call it what's the key word that everybody loves to hear? It's disruption. And every industry requires disruption. Isn't this the disruption that you were talking about that you really wanted?
It's funny you mentioned the European Super League. In hindsight, now with the Saudi emergence, they might look at that and be like, we should have done that. You know what? That might have actually protected, that would have added a layer of protection instead of the way we thought.
Yeah.
Even right now, the way they're thinking, I think they're going at this the wrong way. Instead of looking at this as a threat, they should look at it much more in a collaborative spirit in which the world of football, the literal football economy, is growing tenfold in front of us, and we should now be figuring out how to take advantage of this. Does this mean we can now, as a European club, should we now invest more in our youth and start selling them? That actually might be even cheaper, by the way, than spending
yeah.
on, right? You
Yeah.
can get
And that has a longer term like window, right? Because when you invest, you can only see the fruits of that labor in 20 years. And so it takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of care. You got to take it easy. You got to trust in the process. It's going to cost a lot of money as well. So that, and you got to build a environment for players to practice, right? To go up, like you need that's why you have an under 20 tournament. That's why you have an under 19 and under 17. That's why you got them.
even this, like partnering, get a signed MOU of Atletico Madrid's under 21 will play two games against Al Ittihad starting 11.
Yeah.
Yani, this is all I'm saying is, instead of looking at this,
Man, Al Nasr is doing a tour in Japan playing against European teams. And that's wild, right? Because why? Al Nasr has Ronaldo, so you're going to have Ronaldo play against whoever, Arsenal, Manchester United, whatever, in Japan. Right? And like,
and within that, you're going to have Saudis traveling to Japan, Portuguese people travel. Like with Ronaldo alone, this is the
yes.
other thing is the people that they have invested. It goes back to what you're saying. They're picking guys who have a cult like following too. Benzema has this weird look at our friend over here. Like he's got a cult of Benzema who follows him around the West Side.
Yeah, he's got his boys.
And so the guys they picked are smart. It's not even the way Newcastle has been built. It's a very smart, slow and steady kind of thing. I don't know. I think this fear, it's one of the themes of our podcast is the fear of the other. Instead of fearing the other, I think if they embraced the other, they would be much better for it. And they should have learned just by looking at your golf institution, the most establishment of sports. At the end, money talked, and you had to bow and you had to partner with the Live Tour.
Yeah.
And I think the same conclusion will end up here, that you can't fight it. If you can't beat them, join them. And I think they're gonna have to join them at some point. These calls are ridiculous, and they're anti-economics and they're anti-democratic.
I said Majid running for the next, whatever it is they're going to run on next. And I like it. I think making the shift from a mindset of scarcity to a mindset of abundance is the challenge of the time, right? Like with a lot of things, like and if you operate under scarcity, then, there isn't enough for everybody. And so then I got to fight them all off. And when you operate under the assumption of abundance and that there is enough for everybody, and the more there is, the more there'll be, then you don't feel as, I'm not saying you don't feel competitive, but because competition is nice friction, but you're in it together. And so that's what I'm telling the Gary Neville. We're in this together, buddy. What's the matter, man? Come on, sit down. Have some tea. Let's go.
Take your hand off the holster and let's make it a hug.
What they're looking for? They're looking for some English language commentators.
You know,
I think you're just upset you didn't get an offer, buddy.
update your resume, bro.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Fantastic, great chat, very good.
Good fun.
Saudi League, what do you, the listeners, think?
Yeah, what do you
Are
guys
we
think? Is this
making?
all? Yeah, we off? Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go
No,
ahead.
man, I don't know. Are we off? Are we totally off? Are we totally on? Would love to hear your thoughts on this. I would love to hear different people's perspectives, obviously, because I think it's clear where we stand on this.
And which team do you support in the Saudi League? We heard Al Ittihad. I'm gonna go look at the league now. I'm gonna find my own team. I'll announce it at some point. Let's
No,
see.
if you don't say it to Had, we're gonna have some trouble, man. This is deeper, man. This is deeper.
Football is life. With that, for Waseem, I'm Majid. This is the Third Culture Convos podcast. See you guys next week,
Peace,
inshallah.
peace.